What happens when an empire, once mighty, begins to crumble? Today we're diving deep into a period of Roman history often overlooked, the 3rd century crisis and its long shadow over Egypt. Welcome to Blind History. Over the next few weeks, we will be diving into the history of Egypt. Along for the ride, we are joined by our resident Egyptian expert, who will help us explore this wonderfully rich and fascinating history. We'll be exploring how a perfect storm of economic collapse, plague, and political instability transformed one of Rome's most vital provinces, leaving a lasting impact on its people and their identity. We're not just talking about ancient history here. These themes of resilience, adaptation, and the forging of identity in the face of crisis resonate powerfully even today.
Thanks for having me. It's a story with incredible drama, a real turning point. Egypt wasn't just some territory for Rome, it was the breadbasket, a vital strategic asset. So, when things started to go wrong there, it signaled much bigger problems for the entire empire.
Let's set the stage. What were the initial cracks in the foundation that led to this 3rd century crisis in Egypt?
Well, even before the big meltdown, there were tensions. Think about the early 3rd century and the Severan dynasty. They weren't exactly loved in Alexandria. There's this account of Caracalla, the emperor, visiting Alexandria and being so angered by the satirical plays mocking him that he unleashed his legions on the city, a brutal massacre, supposedly targeting the youth, the plebs. It was a sign of things to come, a disconnect between the rulers and the ruled.
That's a chilling prelude. So this tension simmers, and then the Severan dynasty collapses. What happens next?
That's when the real chaos begins. Imagine a 50-year period of unrelenting economic, military, and social upheaval. Hyperinflation is rampant. Emperors are debasing the currency to pay for endless civil wars, and the value of money plummets. Prices skyrocket, wiping out people's savings. It gets so bad that the economy starts to regress into a semi-barter system.
A semi-barter system, so taxes are being collected in goods rather than money.
Exactly. It's called annona, taxes paid in kind. But that's just one part of the problem. Then you have the plague of Cyprian hitting around the mid-3rd century. Some estimates suggest Alexandria lost over half its population. That's catastrophic for the workforce, for agriculture, for the whole economy.
Half the population. It's hard to fathom that kind of devastation. You mentioned this perfect storm. So we have economic collapse and plague. What's the third element?
Military instability. Egypt becomes a target. The Ptolemaic tribes from Nubia are raiding the south, and then you have the Ptolemaic Empire invading in 269 CE. Queen Zenobia, a formidable figure, seizes control of Egypt for a while. It's a period of constant warfare and disruption.
Zenobia? Her story alone could fill an entire podcast. But let's stay focused on Egypt. So, how does this crisis reshape Egyptian society? We're talking about the 3rd century crisis. But what are the long-term consequences?
This is where it gets really interesting. The crisis doesn't just break things down, it also forces new identities and coping mechanisms to emerge. Think about the rise of Christianity in Egypt. It was already present, but the Diocletianic persecution in the early 4th century really solidifies a distinct Coptic identity.
The Diocletianic persecution. That's a key turning point. What exactly happened?
Diocletian, trying to restore order to the empire, launched a series of increasingly severe edicts against Christians. Churches were destroyed, scriptures were burned, and Christians were stripped of their rights, tortured, and even forced into labor camps.
And this persecution paradoxically strengthens the Christian faith in Egypt?
Absolutely. It forges a sense of shared identity and resilience. The martyrdoms of this era become central to Coptic identity. The Coptic Orthodox Church even dates its calendar from 284 CE, the year of Diocletian's accession, calling it the Anno Martyrum, the era of the martyrs.
So, the Diocletianic persecution becomes a sort of ground zero for the Coptic calendar, a constant reminder of that era.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of how persecution can inevitably strengthen a group's sense of self. The Greek term for an Egyptian, Aegyptios, was gradually adapted into the Coptic self-designation Romaia, Romans in the spiritual, Christian sense. They saw themselves as a holy remnant who had endured to preserve their faith.
Earlier, you mentioned the economic collapse and the shift to taxes being paid in kind. How did that affect the average Egyptian farmer or craftsman?
It squeezed them relentlessly. Imagine you're a farmer already struggling with plague and raids. Now, instead of selling your crops for money, which is losing value anyway, you have to give a portion directly to the state. It disrupts trade, it discourages innovation, and it makes it incredibly difficult to accumulate any wealth.
So, it's a vicious cycle. Economic hardship leads to more instability, which leads to more hardship.
Precisely. And it's not just the farmers, craftsmen, merchants, everyone is affected. The debasement of the currency basically destroys any trust in the system. People start hoarding goods, which further exacerbates the shortages.
But zoom out for a second. We've talked about the economic, social, and religious impacts of the 3rd century crisis on Egypt. But how did this affect Egypt's relationship with the rest of the Roman Empire?
It weakens it significantly. Egypt becomes less reliable as a source of grain and revenue. The constant rebellions and instability drain Roman resources. And, perhaps most importantly, it exposes the fragility of the empire itself. The crisis in Egypt is a symptom of a much larger systemic problem.
It's almost like Egypt becomes a microcosm of the empire's struggles.
Exactly. What happens in Egypt reflects the broader trends of the 3rd century crisis: economic collapse, political fragmentation, and the rise of new identities. The empire is struggling to maintain control, and Egypt is one of the places where that struggle is most visible.
We've established that the 3rd century was a period of immense upheaval, and we've touched on the rise of Christianity as a response to this crisis. How did Constantine's conversion in the subsequent Edict of Milan in 313 CE change the game?
It's a complete reversal of fortune for Christians. Suddenly, they go from being persecuted to being favored by the state. Constantine's Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity, marks a turning point. As the document shows, this act did not merely end state persecution. It fundamentally, irreversibly altered the relationship between the Roman state and the Christian churches of Egypt.
So, it's not just about religious freedom, it's about power and influence.
Precisely. Bishops transition from hunted fugitives to powerful state actors almost overnight. They're holding court, managing funds, and advising the emperor. Alexandria, with its intellectual traditions and large Christian population, becomes a major center of this new Christian order.
Alexandria already had a rich history of theological debate, right? This period must have really amplified those discussions.
Absolutely. The city's catechetical school, with its roots in theologians like Panteius and Clement of Alexandria, flourishes under state patronage. The legacy of Origen, whose allegorical approach to scripture shaped generations, continues to be debated. It's a time of intense intellectual and theological ferment.
It sounds like Alexandria becomes a crucible where different interpretations of Christianity are being forged.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about theology, it's about power, politics, and identity. The 3rd century crisis created a vacuum, and Christianity steps in to fill it, offering both spiritual solace and a new framework for understanding the world.
We've talked a lot about the external pressures on Egypt during this period, the economic collapse, the plague, the invasions. But what about the internal dynamics? Were there any existing social or political tensions that were exacerbated by the crisis?
Definitely. There was a long-standing divide between the Greek-speaking elite in Alexandria and the native Egyptian population in the countryside. The crisis widens this gap. The elite are better positioned to weather the storm, while the rural population bears the brunt of the economic hardship and the plagues.
So, It's a story of increasing inequality and social stratification.
Exactly. And this inequality fuels resentment and unrest. There are rebellions and uprisings throughout the period, as the rural population struggles to cope with the crushing burden of taxation and the lack of resources.
We've been circling around this idea, and now I want to state it explicitly. The unifying topic here is the transformation of Egypt during the 3rd century crisis, and how that crisis reshaped its economy, society, and identity.
That's right. It's a pivotal moment in Egyptian history, one that has lasting consequences. It's a story of resilience, adaptation, and the forging of a new identity in the face of immense challenges.
So, let's bring it back to today. Why does the story matter now? What can we learn from the experience of Egypt during the 3rd century crisis?
I think it offers some valuable lessons about resilience in the face of systemic shocks. It shows how economic collapse, plague, and political instability can interact to create a perfect storm. And it highlights the importance of social cohesion and strong institutions in weathering these crises.
Absolutely. And it also underscores the importance of identity and culture in providing a sense of meaning and purpose during times of upheaval. The Coptic identity that emerges from this period is a testament to the human capacity to find strength and resilience in shared values and beliefs.
Right. When existing systems fail, people look for new ways to organize and understand the world. The rise of Christianity in Egypt is a prime example of that.
The themes of resilience, adaptation, and the forging of identity in the face of crisis are incredibly relevant to us today. It's a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, human beings are capable of finding hope, meaning, and a path forward.
Agreed. I think one of the key insights from this deep dive is that crises don't just destroy, they also create. They can force us to reevaluate our priorities, to build new institutions, and to forge stronger bonds with one another.
So, we will wrap it up here for today, but stay tuned for more history of Egypt. The full audio article will be released this upcoming Sunday for a thorough exploration of this fascinating history. Next, we will be exploring Islamic Egypt, from conquest to Mamluk Sultanate. Join us next time on Blind History with Josh Berry. And I want to leave our listeners with a question. What are the potential crises that we face today? And what kind of identity will we forge in response?